The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of the small tailor shop, casting long shadows across the cluttered workspace. 12-year-old Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, her math textbook spread open in front of her. But her mind was wandering. The steady hum of her grandmother's sewing machine had become like white noise, a familiar soundtrack to her after-school routine. 3 years had passed since her family left their home in the Philippines. 3 years of adjusting to a new country, a new language, a new life. The small apartment above the tailor shop wasn't much, but it was theirs. Her mother worked long hours at the nursing home, sometimes pulling double shifts just to make ends meet. Her father spent his nights behind the wheel of a yellow taxi, navigating the city streets while most people slept. Lila understood why they worked so hard. She saw the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, heard the worried conversations her parents had late at night when they thought she was asleep. She never asked for much. Not the fancy backpack the other girls carried to school, not the brand-name shoes that everyone seemed to have, not the latest phone that her classmates showed off during lunch. She knew better. Her grandmother looked up from the dress she was hemming, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "You're very quiet today, anak," she said, using the Tagalog word that meant so much more than just child. It carried love, warmth, belonging. Lila smiled. "Just thinking, Lola. Thinking is good, but too much thinking makes the heart heavy." Her grandmother tied off a thread with practiced ease. "I need to deliver this dress to Mrs. Rodriguez. She needs it for her daughter's quinceañera this weekend. Will you be okay here for an hour?" "Of course," Lila said, grateful for the quiet time. She loved her grandmother dearly, but sometimes the small shop felt even smaller with both of them in it. After her grandmother left, bells jingling on the door as it closed, Lila tried to focus on her homework, but the numbers on the page swam before her eyes, refusing to make sense. She was tired of fractions, tired of the same 4 walls, tired of feeling invisible at school. She closed her textbook and stood up, stretching her arms above her head. Through the wall she could hear faint sounds coming from the community center next door. She had walked past it hundreds of times but never actually gone inside. It was one of those places that seemed to exist for other people, not for girls like her. But today something pulled at her. Curiosity, maybe, or just the simple need to be somewhere different, somewhere new. She grabbed her house key and slipped out of the shop, making sure to lock the door behind her. The community center's front door was propped open and Lila hesitated at the threshold. The lobby was quiet, with notices pinned to a bulletin board advertising yoga classes, after-school programs, and an upcoming talent show. She could hear voices coming from somewhere deeper in the building, but the hallway to her left was empty. She followed it, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. The hallway opened into a large recreation room with scuffed floors and folding chairs stacked against the walls. Basketball hoops hung at either end, and the faint smell of gym equipment hung in the air. But none of that mattered, because in the corner, pushed up against the wall like an afterthought, sat an upright piano. Lila had seen pianos before, of course. On television, in movies, through the windows of the music store downtown where instruments she could never afford gleamed under bright lights. But she had never been close to one, never touched one, never heard one played in person except for the recordings that sometimes drifted from open car windows. She approached it slowly, almost reverently. The wood was scratched and worn, the finish dull with age. Some of the keys were yellowed, others slightly chipped. It wasn't beautiful in the way the pianos in the store window were beautiful, but to Lila, in that moment, it was the most captivating thing she had ever seen. She looked around. The room was empty. Somewhere in the building, people were talking, laughing, living their lives. But here, right now, she was alone. Her finger reached out, trembling slightly, and pressed down on a single white key. The note rang out clear and pure, filling the empty room with sound. It was simple, just one note, but it was beautiful. She pressed another key, then another, listening to how each one had its own voice, its own character. High notes that sparkled like light on water, low notes that rumbled deep and rich. She didn't know what she was doing. She had no idea how to play, no understanding of music theory or composition, but her fingers moved across the keys anyway, creating random sounds that somehow felt right, felt necessary, felt like something she had been waiting her whole life to do. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Lila's hands froze. She turned to find a woman standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression stern. The woman was middle-aged, dressed in business casual clothes, with the kind of face that looked like it didn't smile very often. I was just..." Lila's voice came out small, apologetic. "That piano is for the music students only," the woman said sharply. "It's not a toy for children to bang on." "I wasn't banging on it," Lila said quietly, but the woman didn't seem to hear her. "This is a community center, not a playground. That instrument is expensive to maintain, and we can't have just anyone putting their hands all over it." The words stung more than they should have. Just anyone. As if Lila was nobody. Nothing. Not worth the space she occupied. Behind the woman, 3 girls appeared in the doorway. Lila recognized them from school. Brittany, Chelsea, and Madison. They were 8th graders, a year ahead of her, and they moved through the school hallways like they owned them. Their clothes were always perfect, their hair always styled, their laughs always loud and confident. Brittany's eyes went wide when she saw Lila at the piano. "Oh my God," she whispered to her friends, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is she seriously touching the piano?" Chelsea giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Does she even know what it is? I mean, seriously. My mom says people from those countries probably never even saw a real piano before," Brittany continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "They probably don't even have music there." The 3 girls burst into laughter, and Lila felt her face grow hot. Shame burned in her chest, mixing with anger and humiliation in a way that made her want to disappear into the floor. "That's enough, girls," the woman said, but her tone lacked any real conviction. She turned back to Lila. "You should go now, and please don't touch things that don't belong to you." Lila walked past them with her head down, their laughter following her down the hallway and out into the afternoon sun. She ran back to her grandmother's shop, locked herself inside, and sat on the floor with her back against the door. She should forget about it. Should push the whole embarrassing incident out of her mind and never think about that piano again. Should accept that some things just weren't meant for girls like her. But she couldn't. Because even through the shame and the hurt, one thought kept echoing in her mind as clear and persistent as that first piano note she had played. She wanted more. That night, Lila lay in her small bed staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the city filtered through her window. Distant sirens, the rumble of the subway, voices from the street below. Her parents were still at work. They wouldn't be home for hours. Her grandmother was already asleep in the next room, her soft snoring a comforting rhythm in the darkness. But Lila couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard those piano notes. She felt the smooth keys under her fingertips. She remembered the way the sound had filled that empty room, beautiful and alive and real. She also remembered Brittany's voice, the laughter, the way that woman had looked at her like she was nothing. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from her friend Annika asking about the homework assignment. Lila replied quickly, then opened her browser. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she typed, "How to play piano." The results flooded her screen. Videos, tutorials, websites, diagrams. She clicked on the first video, turning the volume down low so she wouldn't wake her grandmother. A man's hands appeared on screen, moving across piano keys with easy confidence. "Today we're going to learn the C major scale," he said cheerfully. "This is the foundation of piano playing." Lila watched, mesmerized. She watched as he explained which fingers to use, how to curve your hand, how to read the notes on the musical staff. When that video ended, she watched another. And another. She fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, piano music playing softly in the dark. The next morning at school, she couldn't focus. During lunch, while other kids chatted and laughed around her, she slipped away to the library. The librarian barely glanced up as Lila settled into a computer at the back corner, as far from everyone as possible. She searched for free sheet music and found entire websites dedicated to it. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin. Names she had heard before, but never really understood. She clicked on a piece called Fur Elise and watched the notes scroll across the screen. They looked like a foreign language, but the video tutorial broke it down measure by measure. She found a piece of paper in her backpack and carefully drew a piano keyboard, counting the keys to make sure she got them right. She labeled each one with the note name, just like the tutorial had shown. When the bell rang for class, she folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket. That afternoon, back in her grandmother's shop, she pulled out the paper keyboard. While her grandmother worked on alterations, Lila practiced finger movements on her makeshift piano, pressing the drawn keys and humming the notes she remembered from the videos. "What are you doing, Anak?" her grandmother asked, looking up from a pair of pants she was hemming. Lila felt her cheeks flush. "Nothing, just practicing something." Her grandmother smiled, that knowing smile that said she understood more than Lila gave her credit for. "When I was young in the Philippines, I wanted to learn guitar, but we had no money for a guitar, so I practiced on a stick. My mother thought I was crazy." She laughed softly. "Sometimes the wanting is the first step. The rest comes later." For weeks, Lila's routine stayed the same. School, then the library to watch piano tutorials and print sheet music, then home to practice on her paper keyboard. She learned to read music, memorizing the notes and rhythms. She learned proper hand position, finger numbers, basic scales. Her fingers moved through the motions hundreds of times, muscle memory building even without a real piano beneath them. She started noticing pianos everywhere, in movies and TV shows, in the shopping mall where a man sometimes played during the weekends, outside restaurants in the tourist district. Each time she stopped and listened, watching the player's hands, seeing if she could recognize the pieces from her videos. But she avoided the community center. The memory of that day still burned, too bright, too painful. She couldn't face going back there, couldn't risk another humiliation. Then one morning she woke up before her alarm. It was still dark outside, that quiet hour before the city truly wakes up. She lay there listening to her father come home from his night shift, hearing him move quietly through the apartment so he wouldn't wake anyone. An idea struck her. Crazy, probably impossible, but an idea nonetheless. She got dressed in the dark and slipped out of the apartment, down the back stairs and onto the empty street. The air was cold and damp, and she pulled her jacket tighter around herself. The streetlights cast yellow pools on the sidewalk. A few early morning joggers passed by. A delivery truck rumbled past. She walked to the community center and stood outside, staring at the dark building. Of course it was closed. What had she expected? She was about to turn around and go home when she noticed movement inside. Through the window she could see someone pushing a mop across the lobby floor, the janitor. Lila walked around to the back of the building where she knew there was another entrance. She tried the door, locked. She sat down on the concrete steps, feeling foolish. This was stupid. She should go home. But she didn't. She sat there as the sky slowly lightened, as the darkness turned to gray and then to pale blue. She was about to give up when the back door opened. An older man stood there, bucket and mop in hand. He looked surprised to see her. "You're here very early," he said in accented English. I'm sorry," Lila stammered. "I didn't mean to." He studied her face for a moment. "You're the girl from a few weeks ago, the one at the piano." Lila's heart sank. He had probably heard about it, heard how she'd been laughed at and kicked out. "I should go. You want to play?" he asked. She looked up at him, surprised. "What? The piano? You want to play it?" "They said I'm not allowed," he shrugged. "Mrs. Patterson doesn't come in until 8. The music students don't have class until 3. Right now it's just me cleaning. And I don't see anyone using that piano." Lila couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You mean—" "I could? I come here at 5:30 every morning," he said simply. "I leave the back door open while I clean. What people do in that time is not my business." He held the door open wider. She didn't need to be told twice. She slipped inside and he pointed down the familiar hallway. 1 hour, he said. Then you go before others come. Lila practically ran to the recreation room. The piano sat there waiting exactly as she remembered it. She approached it like someone approaching a dream they're afraid will disappear. She sat down on the bench, placed her hands on the keys the way the videos had taught her, and began to play. Her fingers were clumsy at first, uncertain. The notes came out hesitant and uneven, but slowly, gradually, the piece she had been practicing on her paper keyboard began to take shape. It was simple, Just a basic beginner's exercise. She made mistakes, had to stop and start over several times, but it was real. She was actually playing a real piano, and the sound filled the empty room just like she had imagined it would during all those nights falling asleep to tutorial videos. When the hour was up, the janitor appeared in the doorway. "Time to go," he said gently. Lila stood up reluctantly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much," he nodded. "My daughter was like you once. Music in the heart finds a way." He paused. "Tomorrow, same time. Back door." As Lila walked home through the waking city, the sun now fully risen, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe even happiness. Her fingers tingled with the memory of the keys. She had 1 hour a day, 1 hour to learn, to practice, to become something more than what people thought she was. 1 hour might not seem like much. But for Lila, it was everything. The alarm on Lila's phone went off at 5 in the morning. She was already awake, had been for 10 minutes, watching the numbers on her screen tick closer to the time. She silenced it quickly and got dressed in the dark, pulling on jeans and a sweater, grabbing her printed sheet music from under her mattress where she kept it hidden. Her mother had asked about the early mornings after the first week. "Where do you go, Anak?" "Just walking," Lila had said. "I like the quiet." Her mother had looked at her with tired eyes, working a double shift that day, and nodded. "Be safe, come back before school." That was 6 weeks ago. Now it was routine. Wake up, slip out, walk 3 blocks to the community center, slip through the back door that Mr. Chen left unlocked, practice for exactly 1 hour, then go home to get ready for school. Mr. Chen was always there, mopping floors or wiping down windows, but he never bothered her. Sometimes he would bring her a cushion for the worn piano bench. Once he brought her tea in a paper cup. For the cold mornings, he said simply, the piano became Lila's world. Every day she arrived with new pieces to learn, new challenges to overcome. Her fingers grew stronger, more confident. The calluses on her fingertips didn't hurt anymore. She learned to read music fluently, to hear a melody in her head and translate it to the keys, but it wasn't easy. Some mornings her fingers were so cold they could barely move, and she had to start by just flexing them, warming them up before she could play. Some mornings she wanted to give up, frustrated by a passage she couldn't get right no matter how many times she tried. Some mornings she was so tired from staying up late studying that the notes blurred on the page. But she never stopped coming. Not once. She learned pieces that made her heart ache with their beauty. Chopin nocturnes that felt like moonlight on water, Beethoven sonatas that thundered and whispered, Debussy preludes that shimmered like heat waves. She taught herself everything from free online resources, from videos she watched during lunch, from sheet music she printed at the library. At school, she moved through her days like a ghost. She ate lunch in the library, did her homework in her grandmother's shop, spoke only when teachers called on her. The other kids barely noticed her, which was fine. She had her secret, her morning hour at the piano, and that was enough. But she still saw Brittany and her friends sometimes. In the hallway between classes, at the bus stop, in the cafeteria. They never looked at her, never acknowledged her existence. To them she was nobody, the girl who had embarrassed herself by touching something she had no right to touch. One morning in late March, Lila arrived at the community center to find something new posted on the bulletin board in the hallway. A bright yellow flyer announcing the annual Spring Talent Show. Open to all youth in the community. First prize was a $500 scholarship and a performance slot at the city's summer festival. She stood there staring at it for a long time. $500 could help her family, could pay for groceries or part of the rent, or fix the leak in their bathroom that her father kept saying he'd get to but never had time for. And performing at the summer festival? That seemed like something from a dream. But the thought of standing on stage in front of people playing the piano? Her stomach twisted with anxiety. What if she messed up? What if people laughed at her again? What if Mrs. Patterson recognized her and kicked her out? She walked to the recreation room and sat at the piano, but her hands trembled too much to play. Mr. Chen appeared in the doorway with his bucket. "You saw the flyer," he said. It wasn't a question. Lila nodded. "You should do it." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because She struggled to find the words. "Because I'm not supposed to be here. Because I'm not a real music student. Because last time I touched this piano, people laughed at me." Mr. Chen set down his bucket and walked over. He sat on one of the folding chairs against the wall. I told you my daughter played music. Piano like you. She was very good. But she was afraid too. Afraid people would judge her, would say she wasn't good enough. He paused, looking at something far away. She never performed. Never shared her gift. And then she got sick. Cancer. She died when she was 23. Lila's throat tightened. I'm so sorry. Before she died, she told me her biggest regret. Not that she didn't become famous, not that she didn't make money. She regretted that she let fear keep her music locked inside. She said music is meant to be shared, not hidden. He looked at Lila directly. You come here every morning for months now. Rain, cold, tired, doesn't matter. You have something special. Don't let fear steal it from you. After he left, Lila sat at the piano for a long time. Then she began to play, pouring every emotion into the keys. The fear, the hope, the loneliness, the joy she felt during these secret morning hours. The music swelled around her, filling the empty room. When she finished, she knew what she had to do. That afternoon, she went to the community center's main office. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Mrs. Patterson sat behind the desk, typing on a computer. Excuse me, Lila said quietly. Mrs. Patterson looked up, and Lila saw recognition flicker across her face. Yes? I want to sign up for the talent show. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. The talent show requires an actual talent. This isn't a participation trophy event. Lila forced herself to stand straighter. I want to play piano. Piano? Mrs. Patterson's tone was flat, skeptical. Do you take lessons? I'm self-taught. Self-taught. She said it like it was a joke. The talent show is in 3 weeks. We have students who have been training for years. I'm not sure this is appropriate for you. The flyer says it's open to all community youth, Lila said, her voice stronger now. I live in this community. I'm signing up. Something in her tone must have surprised Mrs. Patterson because she pulled out a clipboard and pushed it across the desk. Fine, but don't expect special treatment. You'll perform in the order you're listed and you'll have 5 minutes maximum. Lila signed her name, her hand shaking slightly. When she handed back the clipboard, Mrs. Patterson glanced at it. You'll need to list what piece you're performing, she said. Lila had already decided. Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2 by Chopin. Mrs. Patterson actually laughed. That's quite ambitious for someone with no formal training. Well, it's your embarrassment, I suppose. As Lila walked out, she heard Mrs. Patterson on the phone. You won't believe who just signed up for the talent show, she said to someone, amusement in her voice. But Lila didn't care anymore. She had 3 weeks. 3 weeks of morning practices. 3 weeks to perfect every note, every phrase, every emotion she wanted to convey. 3 weeks to prove that she belonged. That night, she practiced her fingerings on her paper keyboard until her mother knocked on her door. Lila, you okay in there? I'm fine, Mom, she called back. She stared at the paper keys, thinking about Mr. Chen's daughter. Thinking about all the hours she had spent in that cold recreation room. Thinking about the way music made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. She wasn't doing this for Brittany or Mrs. Patterson, or anyone else who had made her feel small. She was doing it for herself. For the girl who had heard a piano for the first time and felt something wake up inside her. For every early morning when she had chosen music over sleep. For the gift that had been growing inside her all along, just waiting for the courage to let it out. 3 weeks. She could do this. She had to. The days blurred together. Wake up at 5, practice until 6, go home, pretend everything was normal. At school, Lila moved through the hallways in a daze, her mind always on the music. She heard the Chopin Nocturne in her sleep, felt her fingers moving across invisible keys while she sat in class. 2 weeks before the talent show, her grandmother found the stack of sheet music hidden under her mattress while changing the bedding. That evening, Lila came home to find her grandmother sitting at the small kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of her. Her heart sank. Lola, I can explain. Her grandmother looked up and to Lila's surprise she was smiling. You've been learning piano. It wasn't a question. Lila nodded slowly, waiting for the lecture about wasting time, about focusing on school, about being practical. Instead, her grandmother stood and pulled her into a hug. I wondered where you went every morning. I worried, but I trusted you. She pulled back, hands on Lila's shoulders. Show me. Show you what? Play for me. There's a piano at the church, yes? Father Rodriguez lets people practice sometimes. 20 minutes later, they stood in the small church 2 blocks from their apartment. The evening light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the pews. The piano was old but well-maintained, sitting near the altar. Lila's hands shook as she sat down. She had never played for anyone except Mr. Chen, and he had only heard her from a distance while he cleaned. This was different. This was her grandmother, who she loved more than anyone, whose opinion mattered more than she could say. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The nocturne flowed from her fingers, soft and melancholy at first, then building to moments of passionate intensity before settling back into gentle sadness. She forgot about her nervousness, forgot about the church and her grandmother watching. There was only the music, only the story she was telling through Chopin's notes. When the last note faded, she sat in silence, afraid to turn around. Lila. She turned. Her grandmother was crying, tears streaming down her face. That was beautiful, Anak. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Lila felt her own eyes fill with tears. Really? Really? Her grandmother wiped her face with her hand. You have a gift. A real gift. How long have you been learning?
6 months.
At the community center. Mr. Chen, the janitor, he lets me practice in the mornings before anyone else gets there. Her grandmother nodded slowly, understanding. And the talent show? You're performing? How did you know? I see the flyer every time I walk past. I wondered if you would. She took Lila's hands in her own. Listen to me. People will doubt you. They will say you're not good enough, not trained enough, not the right kind of person to play this music. Let them talk. You play for yourself, for the music, for the gift that lives inside you. Nothing else matters. That night, Lila slept better than she had in weeks. But the next morning at school, reality came crashing back. She was at her locker when she heard the voices behind her. Oh my God, did you see the list? Brittany's voice, loud and amused. I know, right? Chelsea laughed. Who does she think she is? Lila's stomach dropped. She knew they were talking about her. My mom told me she signed up to play Chopin. Chopin. She's never even taken a lesson. Brittany's voice dripped with mock sympathy. It's actually kind of sad. She's going to humiliate herself in front of everyone. I almost feel bad for her, Madison chimed in. Almost. They walked past, not even looking at Lila, as if she wasn't worth acknowledging. But Lila had heard every word. Her hands trembled as she closed her locker. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the mirror. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Who was she to think she could play Chopin? A composer that people spent years studying. She was just a girl who had taught herself from YouTube videos and printed sheet music. But then she remembered the feeling of the music flowing through her fingers. The way her grandmother had cried. The look on Mr. Chen's face when he told her about his daughter. She dried her face and went to class. The week before the talent show, Lila practiced with new intensity. Some mornings she arrived at the community center so early that Mr. Chen wasn't even there yet. And she sat on the back steps in the dark, waiting. Her fingers ached. Her back hurt from hunching over the keys. But she pushed through. Mr. Chen brought her a heating pad one morning. For your shoulders, he said. My daughter used to get tense when she practiced too hard. On Wednesday, 5 days before the show, Lila arrived to find someone else in the recreation room. A girl about her age was warming up at the piano, playing scales with mechanical precision. Lila recognized her from school, though she didn't know her name. The girl looked up, startled. Oh, I didn't know anyone else came this early. I come every morning, Lila said quietly. Me too. Well, 3 times a week. I have lessons the other days. The girl stood up. You want to practice? I can come back later. No, it's okay. I'll wait. Are you performing in the talent show? Lila nodded. Me too, piano. I'm doing a Mozart sonata. She smiled nervously. I'm kind of terrified. Me too. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then the girl said, I'm Nina. Lila, you want to share the practice time? We could take turns. I'm here from 5:30 to 6:30 usually. It was strange having someone else there, but also nice in a way. They took turns, half an hour each. Nina played with technical perfection, every note crisp and clear. But there was something missing, something Lila couldn't quite name. It was correct, but not alive. When Lila played, Nina stopped her own practice to listen. After Lila finished, Nina was quiet for a moment. That was really good, she said finally. Like really good. Where do you take lessons? I don't, I taught myself. Nina's eyes widened. You're kidding. No. That's amazing. I've been taking lessons since I was 5 and I don't play like that. She packed up her sheet music. You're going to do great at the show. The kindness in her voice made Lila's throat tight. Thank you. On Friday, 3 days before the talent show, Lila stayed after school to watch the rehearsal. The community center was packed with performers running through their acts. Dancers practiced their routines. Singers warmed up their voices. And there at the piano was Brittany. She played Mozart, a simple piece that Lila had learned weeks ago. She played it perfectly, technically correct, exactly as it was written. When she finished, her private instructor, a stern-looking woman in the front row, nodded approvingly. Good, Brittany. Remember to keep your wrists loose during the transition. Mrs. Patterson called out names from her clipboard. Next we have Lila Santos. Where is Lila? Lila raised her hand from the back of the room. Come on then. Let's hear what you've prepared. Lila walked to the piano, feeling every eye on her. She heard whispers, giggles. She saw Brittany and her friends in the front row, smirking. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, doubt flooded through her. What was she doing? These people had trained for years. She was nobody. But then she remembered why she started. Not for them. For herself. For the music that lived inside her, demanding to be let out, she began to play. The room fell silent. The whispers stopped. And for 5 minutes there was nothing but Chopin's Nocturne, flowing from her fingers like water, like light, like something that had been waiting her whole life to be released. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then someone else. Then more people joined in. Mrs. Patterson stood there with her mouth slightly open, her clipboard forgotten in her hands. Brittany wasn't smirking anymore. Lila stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaking, and walked back to her seat. She had just shown them what she could do. In 3 days she would do it again, but this time for everyone. The night of the talent show arrived faster than Lila expected. She stood backstage in the community center auditorium, wearing the dress her grandmother had sewn for her. It was simple, dark blue with small white flowers embroidered on the collar. Her grandmother had stayed up late 3 nights in a row to finish it. You look beautiful, Anak, her mother had said when Lila came out of her room that evening. Her father had taken the night off from his taxi, and both her parents were sitting in the audience now along with her grandmother. Lila couldn't remember the last time they had all been together for something that wasn't a holiday or emergency. The backstage area buzzed with nervous energy. Dancers stretched, singers hummed scales, a boy juggled balls while pacing back and forth. Lila found a quiet corner and tried to calm her racing heart. Her hands felt cold and clammy. What if she forgot the notes? What if her fingers froze up? What if she disappointed everyone who believed in her? Hey. She looked up to see Nina standing there already in her performance dress. You okay? You look kinda pale. Just nervous. Me too. I threw up twice already. Nina laughed shakily. My mom thinks I have the flu. Despite her anxiety, Lila smiled. When do you go on? I'm number 7, you. 15. So you have to wait forever. That's awful. Nina squeezed her hand. You're going to be amazing. I heard you at rehearsal, remember? Everyone did. The stage manager called out, 5 minutes to curtain. Everyone take your places. The show began. Lila watched from the wings as act after act took the stage. A group of girls performed a hip-hop dance routine. A boy sang a pop song, his voice cracking nervously on the high notes. Twin sisters did a comedy sketch that made the audience laugh. Then Nina walked onto the stage. Lila could see her hands trembling as she sat at the piano. But once she started playing, the trembling stopped. Her Mozart piece was clean, precise, exactly what it was supposed to be. The audience applauded warmly when she finished. More acts followed. A spoken-word poet who made people snap their fingers, an acrobat who did flips across the stage. And then Brittany walked out to polite applause, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her dress expensive-looking and sophisticated. She sat at the piano with confidence, back straight, hands positioned perfectly. When she played, every note was correct, every rhythm exact. It was the kind of performance that came from years of expensive lessons, from a childhood of privilege and opportunity. Technical perfection. But Lila realized something as she listened. There was no heart in it. It was like watching a computer play music. Correct, but not alive. Not real. The audience applauded, and Brittany stood and bowed gracefully before walking off stage. As she passed Lila in the wings, she paused. "Good luck," she said, and her voice wasn't mocking this time. It was neutral, maybe even slightly concerned. "You'll need it following that. More acts. A magic show. Another singer. A violin player." The program moved steadily forward, and with each performance, Lila's nervousness grew. Her mouth was dry. Her stomach churned. She pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Number 15, Lila Santos, you're up next," the stage manager said. This was it. Lila walked to the side stage entrance and waited for her cue. She could hear the current act finishing, a group of boys doing a step routine. The audience clapped enthusiastically. The stage manager nodded at her. "Go." Lila walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding. She couldn't see the audience clearly, just dark shapes and the occasional glint of a phone screen. Somewhere out there were her parents, her grandmother, Mr. Chen. Somewhere out there were the people who had believed in her, and the people who had laughed at her. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever. Her legs were shaking so badly she was afraid she might fall, but she made it. She sat down on the bench and adjusted it slightly, the way she had done hundreds of times during those early morning practices. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about the first time she had touched a piano, the pure joy of that first note. She thought about every cold morning, every frustrating practice session, every moment she had wanted to give up but hadn't. She thought about Mr. Chen's daughter, who had regretted keeping her music locked inside. This was for all of it. All of those moments, all of that work, all of that love for something that had given her purpose when she felt invisible. She opened her eyes and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major floated into the silent auditorium, soft, gentle, like a lullaby. Her nervousness melted away. There was only the music now, only the conversation between her fingers and the keys, only the story she was telling. The melody moved through its phrases, sometimes melancholy, sometimes hopeful, building to moments of passionate intensity before settling back into gentle reflection. She poured everything into it. Every lonely lunch period, every time she felt too small, too invisible, too wrong. Every morning she had chosen music over sleep. Every dream she had of being someone, meaning something, mattering. Her hands moved across the keys with the certainty of muscle memory built over hundreds of hours. She barely thought about the notes anymore. They flowed through her like breathing, like heartbeat, like something that had always been inside her waiting to come out. The final phrases approached, the melody gradually descending, growing softer and softer until the last note hung in the air like a whispered secret, then faded into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The auditorium was completely still. Lila sat at the piano, hands still on the keys, not quite ready to return to the real world. Then the silence broke. Someone in the back stood up and started clapping. Then someone else. Then more people. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding, cheering, some people wiping their eyes. Lila stood on shaky legs and turned to face the audience. The lights were still too bright to see clearly, but she could hear them. She could feel the energy washing over her, warm and real and overwhelming. She bowed, her own eyes blurring with tears, and walked off stage. Her legs barely carried her to the wings before Nina grabbed her in a hug. That was incredible. Nina was crying too. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. The rest of the show passed in a blur. Lila barely registered the remaining acts. When all the performances were finished, the judges huddled together for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Then Mrs. Patterson walked onto the stage with an envelope. "We have our winner," she said, and Lila's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "This year's talent show first place, and the recipient of the $500 scholarship, is..." She paused, looking down at the paper, and Lila could swear she saw something like respect in her eyes. "Lila Santos." The auditorium erupted again. Lila walked back onto the stage in a daze. Mrs. Patterson handed her the envelope and the trophy, then leaned close enough that only Lila could hear. "I was wrong about you," she said simply. "I'm sorry." After the ceremony, Lila was surrounded by people. Her parents held her tight, her father's eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. Her grandmother kept saying prayers of thanksgiving in Tagalog. Nina's mother wanted to know if Lila would consider taking lessons at her daughter's music school. The local news wanted a quote. Random people congratulated her, asked for pictures, told her she had a gift. But the moment that meant the most came when she saw Mr. Chen standing at the back of the crowd. He nodded at her just once, and she saw tears on his weathered face. She pushed through the crowd and hugged him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "You did this yourself," he said. "I just unlocked a door. You walked through it every morning." Later, much later, after the crowds had dispersed and her family had gone home ahead of her to prepare a celebration dinner, Lila stood alone in the empty auditorium. The piano still sat on stage under a single spotlight. She walked up and sat at it one more time, running her fingers gently over the keys without pressing down. This piano had changed her life, not because it was special, but because she had refused to let anyone tell her she didn't belong here. As she walked out into the warm evening air, scholarship envelope in hand, trophy under her arm, she thought about Brittany. Tomorrow at school things might be different, or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe Brittany would still look down on her, still think she was nobody. But it didn't matter anymore, because Lila knew the truth. She wasn't playing to prove anything to Brittany or Mrs. Patterson or anyone else. She was playing because music lived inside her, because she had found something she loved enough to wake up at 5 in the morning for, because she had learned that the only person she needed to prove anything to was herself. And she had done exactly that.